So you've chosen to roll up a Paladin, and who can blame you? It is a class of conviction, of power, and more importantly, a class of purpose. And it happens to be one of my favorite classes in D&D. But even a devout warrior can benefit from just a little extra flair every once in a while. Hello adventurers, and welcome to the Hero Table, your one-stop shop for all things ttrpg and D&D related. And today we're going to be talking about 3 ways that you can play a better Paladin in D&D. So first things first, let's redefine what our oath is, because the oath for a Paladin is a quintessential part of their entire personality and a core mechanic for how their character functions. But it doesn't need to be a one-dimensional commitment to justice or vengeance. Instead, I urge you to rethink your oath, making it more personal, complex, and unique to your character as an individual. And to do this, you could do things like creating a custom oath. Consider working with your DM to create an oath that is specific to your character, that fits their beliefs and values, and is more tailored to their backstory. For example, an Oath of the Wanderer Paladin may focus on things like protecting the lost and the forgotten, whereas someone who's taken an Oath of the Forge may focus on creating and defending sacred relics. You could also do things like exploring the moral complexities of your oath, where instead of having a straightforward good versus evil oath, you kind of exist somewhere in the gray area. Maybe your Paladin has made an Oath of Justice, but they struggle internally with the harshness of the decisions that they've made. Or alternatively, maybe they've made an Oath of Vengeance, but they're haunted by the collateral damage that their quest for vengeance has caused. But no matter what you pick, one thing that you always want to make sure you do is ensure that your oath ties directly into the campaign. You want to make sure that the oath is relevant to the things that are going on in the entirety of the story. Otherwise, what's the point? For example, if the main story of your campaign is about 2 opposing factions going to war and vying for control, maybe your Paladin signed an oath that directly opposes one of the factions, causing you to have to choose sides and decide where your morality is going to lie. Alternatively, maybe your Paladin swore an oath of vengeance against the BBEG themselves, and now they're on a quest to hunt down and destroy the BBEG to fulfill their oath. So in an example to try and tie all of this together, maybe you have a Paladin who's playing with an oath of redemption, and they used to be part of a ruthless mercenary band that carved swaths of blood throughout the country that they were part of. And now your Paladin is on a quest for redemption, refusing to kill anybody and instead only subduing or using non-lethal attacks on the targets. And this could become a rather morally challenging problem for the Paladin later on when it turns out that the BBEG of the campaign is using the very mercenary group that the Paladin used to be a part of. So now they have to choose about following their oath and following their morals, or doing what they know is right and getting rid of the mercenaries that once caused them to do so much harm. So the next thing that I want to talk about is embracing a unique divine connection. Because, contrary to what many people believe, Paladins' powers do not actually come from a divine deity or a god, even though many Paladins tend to serve a god or divine deity. Their Paladin powers actually come from the oath itself. It comes from within. But that doesn't mean that you should ignore the potential ramifications of what having a divine connection could do for your character in terms of roleplay and mechanics. And one way to do this is to have things like an unconventional deity or source of your oath, where instead of drawing your powers from a traditional source like the oath that you made, you draw your powers from a celestial force, or even a concept like hope or justice. For example, a Paladin of the Ancients may have sworn an oath to themselves in which they'll protect old documents and sacred relics as well as preserve the natural order of the world, but they also may directly serve a spirit who runs a sacred forest and be indebted to them and use their powers to benefit that forest and that deity specifically. And if that is the route that you want to go, you should really consider having your Paladin have a deep and personal relationship with the deity that they're serving. Because by having that direct and personal relationship with the deity, you can implement things like visions, conversations, or even debates about moral complexities or the nature of the oath that you've taken itself. And if you do choose to use a deity in addition to that of your oath, it may help to use things like mechanical tie-ins to reflect the nature of the relationship that you have with that deity and your oath. For example, if your Paladin has sworn an oath in relation to that of a sea god, maybe their smites do things like thunder or lightning damage or have additional effects that reflect that deity's nature. Or alternatively, if your Paladin has signed on and sworn an oath to a deity that's revolving around the spear of death, maybe their smites do things like necrotic damage or resurrect corpses that are felled by the smite. And so the last thing that I'm going to talk about in this video is one that you should honestly do with every character that you make, but I'm going to talk about it regardless because it is super duper important, and that is adding a personal quest or conflict to your character. Because Paladins are often driven by a strong sense of purpose and conviction, and by adding a personal quest or conflict to that purpose and conviction, you can make your character all the more compelling. And in a similar fashion, like when we were redefining your oath, using tie-ins to the actual campaign is a great way to do this. So work with your DM to create a personal quest that directly ties your backstory to that of the campaign. For example, because of your character's backstory, you might be hunting down a sacred relic, trying to save a fallen comrade, or trying to restore glory to a corrupted order. And by working with the DM, you can tie these plot threads directly into the main story of the campaign, meaning that not only do you get to enjoy the experience of completing the campaign itself, but you also get to experience personal growth for your character as you progress through the story. But I know from my own experience playing a paladin that the best kind of conflict that a paladin can face is not an external threat, but a conflict inside. There's an old African proverb that I heard once that says if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm. And I think for paladins that applies better than any other class in D&D. Because paladins are absolute walking tanks, and they are monsters on the battlefield, carving swaths through their enemies. But unfortunately, a conflict internally that makes them struggle with their oath could be the difference between them retaining their powers and then losing them entirely. For example, a paladin of devotion might be torn between loyalty to their order or the love that they have for a non-believer. Or even a paladin of conquest, who after using methods that are particularly harsh starts to wonder if what they're doing is right in the long run. By doing this and creating an internal struggle where your paladin starts to question the nature of their own oath and whether or not they're doing what they believe is the right thing to do, you can create an internal conflict that can really develop your character and cause them to grow as a person and develop more from a roleplay perspective. Which ultimately leads us to my last point in the video, which is growth through roleplay. I encourage everybody to use the story of their campaign to build and develop their character as the campaign goes on. Because a mistake that I've seen so many players make over the years is that they go into a campaign with a character who is already at the end of their growth and development cycle. And as a result, despite all of the roleplay, all of the camaraderie, and all of the events that take place during the story, their character never changes or evolves in the slightest. And so by using the campaign to explore your character's growth, you can ask yourself the important questions like, does my paladin even stay with his oath until the end? Or do they forsake their oath or grow into something new, or maybe even take a new oath? These are all things that should be asked, as they can lead to some of the most dramatic and memorable moments for your character. For example, maybe at the start of a campaign, an Oath of Vengeance paladin is absolutely consumed by their desire for revenge. But over the course of the campaign, eventually they start to let go of that desire for vengeance, instead shifting their focus to protecting others and taking a more empathetic and compassionate role. And so there it is, 3 ways that you can play a better paladin in D&D. Whether it's redefining your oath, embracing a unique and divine connection, or implementing a personal quest or conflict. By using these things, you can take your paladin from just another stalwart symbol into a truly memorable and divine character. And if you found any of these tips or tricks useful, do let me know down in the comment section below. And if you have your own tips or tricks that might help people's experience at the D&D table, do leave them down below as well, as I love the discussion. But that is all the time I have today, adventurers, so thank you for stopping by the Hero Table, and as always, I hope your rolls are critical, your adventures are legendary, and I'll see you at the table.